Hi, I'm Matt Barry, and this is Low Budget Visions, where we celebrate personal, DIY, independent filmmaking. I'm joined today by return guest Walter Smits. Walter and I had discussed a lot of things last time we spoke relating to the ideas of anti-film, playground absurdism, diary films. I'm a big fan of Walter's films, so I'm glad we can speak again. Walter, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm so hyped to be back. So glad you reached out.
Sure. No, I really enjoyed our discussion last time, and you sent me recently a new film that you completed, I think just earlier this year.
Yep.
And so I wanted to hear a little bit about that. But maybe before we get to that, do you want to sort of fill everybody in on what you have been working on since we last spoke? Any new projects of note that you'd like to share?
Um, let's see. We I guess not too much is new. This project I had shot over the summer and then edited in the late winter or in the end of the year that we'll be talking about. And then another project I'm working on is it's called The Little Hunter Who Knew Not What to Do, and it's a video where I am sort of embodying masculinity in the form of acting out kind of being a hunter, using toys and GI Joes as sort of a way to reckon with like my non-binary identity mixed with uh being raised as a man and sort of being held up and raised socially in certain ways. So uh, with this, especially with hunting and growing up in northern Minnesota, um, that's a big thing, and I was always on the outside of it, so it feels like this kind of um, ritual to me that I've been exploring out at my grandpa's old land, where he built a cabin and sort of connecting with his ghost that way, while also sort of exploring what I find silly about the that sort of ritual and the expectation behind it through kind of a material look at it.
I love how you explore these ideas through these, this kind of playful approach to filmmaking. That whole idea of playground absurdism. Again, it sounds like this is something that you're kind of bringing into this, using, you're saying like using toys and figures to sort of, act out these ideas and to get that across. I think it's amazing. I mean, it's one of the things that, well, we'll talk about it with your new film because I just can't wait to hear more about that. But no, that sounds like an interesting project. And now, is this also something that you find connected with your digital diary films as well? Bringing in that kind of that sort of personal element because it sounds like there could almost be a documentary quality in terms of you're talking about the locations.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually I think about especially like the film we'll talk about and some of the other features like the Winnie the Pooh one and the Wizard one.
Yeah.
I do actually think about those as documentary more so than anything else, if I were to like categorize it, just because it is sort of an exploration of the form itself, as well as an exploration of my relationship to like my friends and the spaces that I inhabit. Like Wizard on High E was very much about like the neighborhood that I was living in at the time. And these spaces around there that I just really love that have as much character as anything. And so it's finding an excuse to do that. And then so yeah, I think with the Little Hunter thing, it's definitely on the kind of playground absurdist documentary-esque style of my work. I'd initially gone into it wanting to do more of that like digital diary type of thing for it, but it just sort of called for a different approach. So I've been incorporating a bit more play as opposed to like the more archival footage collection for that other process.
Yeah, that brings up a question. I don't want to like derail us here too early in this conversation, but I'm curious about something. When you are putting together, when you get an idea for a film and you're thinking about how do I approach this, do you find that even when you're working with something that's, it's very personal, has kind of a documentary quality to it, maybe like even, quasi autobiographical elements, whatever that might be, do you find that you like to approach it with a veneer of fiction, let me call it, like a almost like a layer of a layer of fiction over top of the documentary and autobiographical elements? Do you find that almost helps you get into the material in some way and find your approach?
Yeah, well, for my first thought coming to mind is I did watch your surveillance film. And so that question feels very similar to the way that you approach that. And uh, I haven't watched all of your or the full things of all of your other videos, but I've seen bits and pieces of them, and uh, that's something I was thinking about with your film was how you have this like very, very, very thinly veiled like fictional plot that is drawn through it about this job. And I thought that was a lot of fun. But um yeah, I think what happens is as far as that goes is that as opposed to it being like I don't necessarily approach it as wanting it to be personal. It just ends up being really personal. Um and so like I'll just use Wizard again as an example. With that, I just thought of how funny it would be to have this sort of anti like adventure where just like there's roadblocks at every stop, and then I started thinking about these characters and the sort of like mundane situations that they could be in, that just like takes away from the adventure aspect of it. And so I started there, as like wanting to tell that story, and then I started filling in my friends into the characters, and they would sort of, with that, it would sort of change the character, and so because of that, it becomes more personal. And then I start thinking about where we should be shooting these things, and so that kind of I fill in the spaces, like kind of a weird version of the regular like quote unquote like Hollywood process of things, but the further I go along with it and the more details that I get, and then once I shoot it, because it's also improv and off the cuff, it just ends up feeling more and more like a home video than I might have imagined in my head. Um, which I guess is sort of um yeah, so it has that veil over it, but the veil I guess becomes a veil at the end, and in the beginning it doesn't start like that. Um it's almost like the veil is the whole thing until I start like adding things underneath it or whatever. But yeah, so it's but they're definitely personal, and obviously now I've made enough of them where I sort of start thinking about it, but I still every time I like to almost trick myself into um not letting it be personal at the beginning, and then finding that as we're making it. And and I think we'll talk about it with Zarthan too, but this one was really fun because it was all toys, and so it was fun to find a way to make it feel personal all the same with all my different friends, and the settings and the behind camera direction and stuff like that that um, helps to find those little moments that really shine and make it feel really personal and feel like a documentary. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, it's one of the things I love about your work is that it really brings the the play back to filmmaking, and it's something that I actually can't remember if we discussed this last time or not, but I think you made the point about I believe you said when you were like just starting out making films with your friends, that spirit of play is something that you wanted to continue. Is that correct? I mean, I don't want to mischaracterize what you had said, but I think you said that that was something that you found very early on and kind of wanted to keep going.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
totally. I can't remember exactly what I said either, but it is I mean, it was something that was a motivator for me, especially coming out of film school and feeling this sort of rigidity of I always think about it like the cheat codes that people have um in how to make like a good film
yeah,
and the sort of process that you need to go through to do that. And especially for people who are more like commercial production Hollywood based, they get really caught up in that and it loses um, what I think is exciting about it, which is like seeing things come to life and capturing moments that and spaces and people that you find special. And so, um, like in my last year of film school, I made this YouTube series called Blood Squirt, and it's like the most like highly produced thing that I've done, where we had a script and we had a shoot schedule, and I like raised money and had people come back up to my dad's house in Duluth, where we camped in the yard and shot everything in Duluth. And it was kind of it turned out really good, and I do want to do stuff like that again, but there was this sort of I found myself kind of acting like a director instead of directing and making stuff that really felt honest to me. And I can see that when I rewatch it, is there's stuff where I'm acting out Wes Anderson or acting out whoever it might be, and um and the parts where that wasn't happening are the parts that I like the most in retrospect. So anyways, and those parts, like all the things that I really liked from that project are stuff that came from me kind of letting loose and just like having fun and having my friends roll around and rolling around myself and just like doing weird stuff and seeing how it fit together. And so coming to that and then getting done with school, it was sort of frustrating to see look around, like have that realization to myself and then see all of these like senior projects and look around and see all these people, and everybody is putting on such a like insecure front about what it means to be a filmmaker. And it started feeling like really sad to me and also really frustrating. And so that's kind of how this like idea became a thing, is just by playing and just letting myself just go out and do something and shoot a thing in a day. Uh and so it was really good for my practice. And I mean it's stuff too that I've like with every project, I think there's something of identity for myself that comes out of it, where you get to I think that's it's true for any style of like art, but with this, when you kind of hone in on it and you start to see your own language and things start to pop out. And so those things have helped me a lot with my identity in different ways, and um as both an artist and a person. So yeah, anyways,
well, that's
that's
great to be, that you've been able to explore that through these films. And as you were talking about this, I had this thought that, in a way, all of these films eventually, I think, can come to function as documentaries, as much documentaries of their own making, the time in our lives when we made them, that kind of thing. And it's something that, talking about the sense of play, I know, like when I look back at the first films I made, when I was a kid, going back 30 plus years, that there is when I watch now, I mean, all I see is the document. I mean, they might as well be home movies, as far as what the interest that they have for me now is just simply looking at, oh, that's that was me and my brother and sister as kids, and acting out. The stories and things seem almost irrelevant to me now. It's just looking at kind of the way things were, and I find that even as I get older, that I look back at films I made 15, 20 years ago and have that same um, perspective now. So yeah, it's really interesting to think about, and your films have definitely um, inspired a lot of thoughts for me about this, as far as just not just what is a feature film, but really what is a film, what is a documentary, and so it sounds like it's allowed you to explore personal aspects of your own life through that. And yeah, there's I guess my point is there's just so much more that can come out of a project than we ever imagined going into it. Like you said, when you set out to make a film, you're not setting out with that documentary aspect in mind, but it sort of emerges at the end in some ways. So yeah, I find that very interesting. Do you find and I can't remember how long have been making the feature films and the playground absurdist films, but have you noticed your own perception of them changing as you look back at the earlier films? Do you kind of view them through like a different lens now, of just with the distance of time?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they still feel kind of fresh to me, so I feel like in the last year or two, the like process became a little more comfortable for me, and looking back at all the different things that I've made, is starting to feel a little bit further away. But whenever I watch them now, it's still sort of it feels like a almost like a study of like how I'm doing it and giving me ideas for like how to do it going forward. But at the same time, like a huge part of the inspiration for them is, um, like my own childhood home videos that I made when I was a kid of like random little sketches that make no sense and everything. And so I do bring that energy into it, like wanting to achieve that like home video feeling to it, in like the essence, not always the technical style. Um, and yeah, so it it also it's a lot of fun to watch with the people who made it, and who were involved with me because it does serve as that sort of like vessel for memory.
Oh yeah.
And um you start talking about like the whole day, and it was funny when that one thing happened, or we started talking about this or how this like came on because of like a breakup that happened or whatever, and so they definitely serve that purpose. And I do, in sort of the vein of like preemptive nostalgia, I feel like is how I'm always making my stuff. Like I've started saying to my friends like this is stuff that we're gonna cry about later, because it's so nice, and it doesn't exactly have that effect yet, but everything that I make, I want to have with that intention where it's just fun for everybody, and everybody can look back on it fondly.
Yeah, no, that is great when that happens. I'm curious if, as you look back on the earlier films now, even if it's just a distance of a few years or whatever, is there anything already that surprises you about them when you look back at it, like the things that you weren't expecting to see in them at this point?
Yeah, I think one thing that I didn't give myself like credit for, when I was making them, is that I think that I have a lot of really good intuitive, like impulses for, like people and the way that they are, and especially with my friends. And so it's interesting to kind of like look back at them and watch as I'm making movements with the camera, or like looking at certain things, or sort of anticipating someone doing something, just in the same way that like most any documentary filmmaker would talk about, working with different subjects and stuff. And so, but when I was making them, it felt like I'm just like capturing garbage and running around and goofing off with my friends. And so it's fun to like look back and see those little nuances where I'm really sitting with certain moments or really like I watch myself start to turn the tripod and then realize something's gonna happen. So I stop and it's so small that like I notice the little glitch on the frame and then I don't. So um and it's fun to see those things. It's like a good lesson for myself too, and just um, trusting myself and having confidence in myself as I go on with other things that might be more ambitious or whatever. And so and also it's just been like really important for my own like self-confidence and um, social anxieties and whatever is just like seeing these and like kind of being able to appreciate myself a bit, which can be tough. But yeah, so I think that's definitely
It seems to me like your cast, your friends acting in the films seem to really trust you. They seem to really trust where you're going with everything, and that's just something that kind of comes across to me when I watch them because you explore so many ideas and take so many unconventional approaches to making a film, and yet I feel like your cast, your friends, your actors are all willing to go on that journey with you. They don't seem they seem like they get into the spirit of it. It seems like it all comes across, it all comes together very well, at least, from my perspective watching it.
yeah, no, it feels like that in person too. It's always so much fun because when we made Zarthan last summer, there's just kind of a buzz about the day and everyone was really kind of excited to come over and I had like all the little like rules or and all the toys and just sort of like got everybody into this space where it really feels like less of a production and more like, oh, Walter's invented a new game that we're gonna play today. And so everyone's kind of excited because it's like um we all have like agency in it and everybody's playing a part and it's still kind of like surprising and fun because like we are improving. So it's really just like doing these is really just like one big game and one good excuse for us to be able to like hang out. Um and so yeah, I'm thankful that they do trust me and like want to have fun with it. And but yeah, it's really, especially as we get older, it's and we've gotten older and or gone away from like a lot of these people I've lived with at different times and stuff, and so we don't see each other as much. Um and so when we get to have like a day like that where we're really just playing like kids, like we are like 22 again and hanging out in a dirty house or whatever, it's really great. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I think it's really wonderful, in fact, that you've all been able to keep, just to keep in touch and to keep doing these projects and for everybody to be on the same page with it and wanting to participate in it. I think that analogy to it being like a game is especially interesting to me because I don't think that I really can't say I've ever heard that analogy applied to making a film before in the way that you're using it.
Oh,
And I think that's a really interesting concept. I mean, that you are laying it out like I guess like a board game where there's or whatever, like a role-playing game, I imagine, where
yeah.
there's different, like you said, different rules, different like props or whatever that toys that you're using. And within the framework, you play with that and see where it goes. I think that's a really interesting way of putting it. So do you find that when you think about making a movie, if the idea presents itself and you're going to be seeing your friends like in the near future, is that something do you kind of consciously lay out what you're going to tell them as far as here's the framework, like you said, the rules, the guidelines, but like beyond that, it's like up to you. I mean, but how do you lay that out to them? I mean, I'm sorry, how do you conceive of that before you lay it out to them.
Yeah, so I think of it a little bit, it's a little bit of a game for myself too, because I think about like the um kind of going back to that idea of like performing being a director.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking about the different like steps, maybe from like the perspective of like a child or something might think about it. And so it's like, oh, a director builds a call sheet and a director builds a shot list and a director has directions and whatever. And so I put that together on a sheet that sort of is like resembles like a call sheet. And this time I referred to it as my assistant director, was just this like piece of whiteboard that I had written stuff on. And then on there it just had like the order of the shots that we were doing and the kind of general vibe that we were trying to achieve. And then on the back I had like rules where it's like when I point at this person, they're gonna jump out as the dog or whatever. Um and yeah, so that's kind of how I go about like those sort of rules. They end up it's fun too because they end up changing once we're actually like sitting down and we get into the 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 bulk of it or whatever. And I'm not really thinking about all these arbitrary rules that I made. It's almost more of getting people into the playful mindset, and which is fun for me too, to be like, hey, here's all these arbitrary silly rules that are kind of funny, huh? And then and those are just for us before we get going on it.
Yeah. Wow. No, I mean, it's a really fascinating approach. It's one of the reasons I always enjoy, asking you about it when we've talked, because it seems like it captures something so fundamental to the, I think like what, for a lot of people, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think for a lot of us, like we fall in love with the creative process because of that sense of fun and play, and it's something that is always there. But
Mhm.
as you pointed out, it so often gets lost in the self-seriousness of, the correct way of doing things and the professional, quote unquote, professional way of doing things. And yet, it doesn't have to be lost, and that's why I think it's great. I love the fact that your friends have continued to participate in this and to um, be a part of it, because yeah, it creates also a really interesting document of, your of different times in your lives. And yeah, it's all these things coming together. It's fascinating. I want to ask you this too. I'm coming from the perspective of something I've noticed, and I'm just curious if you have too, is that since you make the digital diary films,
Mhm.
do you find, as you look back on those versus your, your, well, I know that you effectively consider them documentary, but I was going to use the word fiction, but let's say your
Yeah.
playground absurdist films, at least. Do you find that the memories of the memories of like just the day that you spent filming the playground absurdist feature, do you find that those memories are stronger for you than the memories that you're attempting to document in the digital diary format, or maybe there's no difference? I'm just curious if you
Oh,
see a
yeah,
difference.
that's a good question. Yeah, I would say they are because I think in the digital diary films, a part of that process is sort of weaving together things and inventing memories, sort of.
Hmm.
Is a little bit of what I like doing for that, is kind of like making up dreams and making up memories by tying together bits and pieces of like actual things that have happened. Um, Sort of like maybe like mimicking the diary film process, which is why I put that digital on the front end of it, because it doesn't feel fair to say that it's a diary film, um but it's coming from the same place essentially. It's more like mining feeling memories of feelings. And then so like the memories of the day with the playground absurdist stuff are very strong because um you're so present. I think that's something I really like about it, is that like being with the camera and being with the people, it's like and um forcing it all to happen within a condensed time frame of a day or maybe half a day, 2 days in a row or something. It just makes you there, and you don't start to like nitpick on details. Because I also like to say like whatever happens is exactly perfect. Because we really only do, and unless something like devastating or inappropriate happens, um, or like something falls apart or whatever, like, and even then we still usually go through, but yeah, we really only do like one take at a time. Because it is about that process. But yeah, it's just like really present, and you're really with like really think about everything that happened, and you're really with everyone in the room, and
Yeah. So you're
yeah,
really heightened state, I guess, heightened, just like heightened awareness of, everything that's going on and especially having to respond to it in that improvisational format, I imagine. Yeah, I mean, part of the reason I ask it, like I said, it was kind of coming up from a personal thing that I had noticed a few years ago. I was just basically purging old video footage that I just don't have the room to store anymore from projects going back like 15 plus years at this point, of narrative short films I'd made, much much more traditional, much more scripted. These were things I did right after film school, very kind of traditional type of filmmaking, and I had the raw footage that I had shot, and I was because I, don't have space to store all multiple hard drives, blah, blah, blah. I decided it's just time to go through and delete this. And I was taking like one last look at it. And it was funny to me because I could see the tails and ends of each clip of getting things, set up and saying action and all that stuff and cut. And even beyond that, I actually have like behind the scenes footage that would be shot. Like I'd have, somebody just with a second camera just grabbing behind the scenes footage. And what's interesting to me watching it from the vantage point of almost 20 years later is that when I watch the behind the scenes footage, I feel very detached from it. It's like I know that was us on the day of the filming, and there I am, setting up the camera and whatever. But I don't feel any real connection with it. When I watch the film, though, the finished film, all of the memories of that day come back to me much, much stronger. And even though I'm not directly seeing it, it's just the memory of that it evokes from watching the film that was made that day.
yeah,
So that's where this question came from, because it just seems like your films and your process explores a lot of these ideas in a very immediate, vital way. I mean, it is, I mean, it sounds like it is part of the process. So that's
mhm,
interesting to hear that you do have that effect watching your playground absurdist films as more so than the digital diary films.
yeah, yeah, totally. So with that, I guess I have a question for you. What is
Sure.
the like do you feel like the idea of like performing as a director resonates with you as well?
Yeah, and I think like when you and I were first, actually even before we spoke, when I heard your interview on the experimental film podcast, I was like, I really was fascinated by everything you were saying with that, because sometimes it's like hearing somebody articulate something that you are, you're aware of, but you're not quite sure how to articulate it. And I think hearing you say it, it's like that's very much how I feel like I approach it as well. You were talking about like you just said the kind of performative, or like directing as a performance, I guess. And
Hmm.
yeah, and so for me, it ties back to that sense of play. I mean, basically, from when I first picked up a camcorder, what was it, 30, almost 32 years ago, and made my first attempt at a movie, it's always, that sense of play has always been important. So, I'm sorry, that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but yes, I mean, I think that it very much does resonate with me. And, um, something about your work that appeals to me for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I was always so frustrated with myself when I was first like especially like after film school when it's like I just don't have that like technical drive and perfection to like make these like commercial pieces. And I was really quickly getting burnt out on trying to keep up with trends and like what I should be getting on top of and camera gear and technical like all of that stuff is just like so frustrating. Doesn't It's not really how my brain works. But and so it's been nice through this process to like be able to like understand that why I'm doing this is just because I like to play. And like when you were saying when I first picked up a camcorder and was making my first thing, it's like what's so exciting about that is that like for me, I remember the thrill of like seeing myself play for the first time. Um and that's like so awesome because it's like you're watching yourself learn and grow, and you're watching yourself like be free, essentially like creating your own world, and nobody is stopping you from doing whatever it is that you're doing. And I think there's something really powerful in that. And so that like excitement of having the camera for the first time is cool. And but yeah, and I think it's cool that some people and that you resonate with it, where it's just like um I mean, for me, it's just like I don't need to make like anything that's technically nice. Like there's certain like looks that I've kind of been drawn to, and with this last one, I used a nicer camera that has nicer lenses because I like the like intimacy of how tight the depth of field is, and I like uh the Pro Mist filter that kind of gives it that angelic look, especially with all the sparkles. And but that's only because I started kind of falling in love with a certain look as opposed to like wanting to be technically savvy. Because that's
Yeah,
just
that I think is what you just said is the key, right? I mean, it's something you know, it's an idea, an approach you fell in love with and wanted to do it because it's what's right for you, what's right for the project. It's not being imposed by, some kind of bogus technical standards that just I
yeah,
think I think you used the word trends earlier or fads. I can't remember, but that basically that idea, like, and I think that's such a problem for people starting out. Well, and not just starting out, but in any
yeah,
level of a production career is when you have to try to keep on top of that, and it's exhausting.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And some people are just like wired that way too, and
Mhm.
so it's freeing to like understand that you aren't, and it can be frustrating because it's like what I do is not exactly going to be like financially viable ever, but I think sometimes you just have to like accept that and let
Yeah.
yourself enjoy it. And I think some people go the other route too. I just feel like mentioning that I understand that people like go a certain route because they have to like provide for themselves or get
Sure.
um
Yeah.
health insurance and all of that. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
like I'm not to poo-poo the people who do that, because I mean I love movies, and I think the technical ability to do stuff like I just rewatched in theaters Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master, and
Oh yeah.
that's just one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, where I'm envious that somebody can utilize a tool well enough to make something look so uh pretty much perfect.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, and I'll just stress that myself that I don't have anything, certainly don't have anything against in any way the call it the Hollywood model, the industry model. I love that. I love watching it. I think you can achieve, and there's people who can achieve incredible things that way. People for whom that's right for them. I always think of Spielberg in that sense. That Spielberg
Yeah.
really, I mean, to give an obvious example, but I think he has such a personal connection with that type of filmmaking and really needed to get to that level of
Yeah.
of just the production value to do what he does the way he wants to do it. But I think that's the key. It's like about doing it the way you want to do it. And I think unfortunately sometimes you know people feel pressured about the commercial considerations or doing the things that are going to make a lot of money and all that. And I think like you said, and I think it's one of the great takeaways from your films is that it's okay not to it's okay to recognize that that's not you as a filmmaker, and it doesn't have to be, and you
Yeah.
you can do all these other things. And it's something I feel like I'm still kind of learning with each project is moving away from the expectations. I'll just a quick story, but I always remember a film I was working on with my friend Cullen, who really helped me kind of get over some of these expectations of, the right way of doing things. And we were filming something, and I realized I had forgotten to get a piece of coverage, so I was going to have a jump cut in the middle of a scene, and I was kind of fretting over this because we're going to have to go back and get some kind of coverage. We're going to have a jump cut in the middle of the shot. And he was off doing a crossword puzzle or something, listening to me kind of stressing out about this, and he just kind of looked up and said, so what? Like it's no problem. It's just you've got a jump cut. And it's like, brilliant. Of course. Why didn't I think of that? Just let it be there. There's no reason it can't be. And
Yeah.
sometimes it just takes, I think you have to be like almost reassured sometimes when you're starting out with those types of films that, um, and I mean, it took me, I was like I said, doing more traditional production for years, with my own independent projects, not commercial projects, just my own projects. But, I think it's like you do get to a point where you just want to keep kind of pushing, exploring what you do. And then it like opened up this whole new, terrain to explore. So anyway, yeah, I think I was agreeing with your point that it's not to, in any way to denigrate or dismiss what Hollywood does, what people can do with a lot of resources. It's just that it's not for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And yeah, it's hard to reconcile with that, I think, for a lot of people. And I mean, I know I have some friends who work in the industry, and they they're excited just hearing me talk about what I'm working on because they feel a little trapped in what they're doing. But, you
Yeah,
know,
that's
uh,
something interesting. Like I do think that you were talking about at the end of film school that you encountered a lot of. I think the word you used was insecurities, with people maybe feeling like they had to kind of play like you said, almost like play the part of a director, like what's expected of you as a director. And I think at some point, like when as people whatever path you go, as you become more comfortable with it, a lot of those that facade can kind of come down. So like you said, even your friends working in the commercial film industry can look at what you're doing, and they might just see it as, oh, Walter's doing what he's passionate about, like we are, or whatever. There's not that same, I think that's something that every as you continue to do this, whatever direction you go, thankfully, I think most people kind of outgrow that, but there is that moment, and I think it's like post film school where it can be very intimidating if you don't share those same interests.
yeah, yeah, totally.
I want to ask you about I could go on and on. I want to ask you real quick about, before we get to any later, about your film that I watched. I believe this is your latest production, and so this is what Zarthan in three parts.
Yeah,
Just read the description that you have here on Vimeo, and then we can say anything you'd like about this. You say the film is an experimental documentary rooted in playground absurdism, where improvisation, homemade dolls, and toys become vessels for spontaneous storytelling. Friends perform in a loose, meandering narrative guided by playful direction from behind the camera, where giggles, asides, and off screen voices break the illusion of a contained world. Blurring fiction and reality, the film transforms everyday materials into absurd characters, embracing imperfection and unpredictability as essential parts of the process. Through its DIY aesthetic and communal energy, it explores play as both a filmmaking method and a way of processing the world, one where laughter, impulse, and discovery shape the story as much as the subjects themselves. And I wanted to read that because I thought that was a, beautifully put summation of the whole thing. So I wanted to ask you if I know we've talked a bit about it already, but is there anything you'd like to say about the genesis of this project, how this one came about?
yeah. So this one came about because my friend and I, or my old coworker and I, were on a delivery. I worked at a vintage furniture place, and so we would deliver pieces to clients' houses. And we had this really weird experience. It was just kind of a goofy situation with a client and not what we expected the whole situation to be like. And so we were just kind of in this weird mind frame, and the client lived on Zarthan Street, and so we started joking about if I don't even remember exactly what the original bit was, but it was just like, what if there's Zarthan's this alien, and then we started talking about the fish. I don't know. And so it was really just like this goofy bit, but I really I think when I'm getting attached to these ideas, it's something of finding the kind of absurd core of any genre. And so this one was sort of the sci-fi time travel thing that I was excited about. And that's really how it came about. I just kind of filled in the pieces and tried to have some sort of um, anti-time travel thing. And but yeah, I mean that's really the basic conception. And then I really fell in love with the idea of having like sparkly blue aliens that were made from dolls from Goodwill, and um yeah, and then ordered, some of those puppets I just found online for cheap, and I just loved how they looked. And um some of those hand puppets are sort of the dog character that's in the film is actually a puppet that my grandma had, and she had this like local television show in the late 60s to mid 70s called Miss Jane's Treetop House or something like that. And she used like puppets like that. And so that's kind of where I draw that inspiration from. But yeah, that's kind of how usually that's how the basic conception of these things works, is I just get really kind of fixated on these weird ideas of a genre and the silliness of it, and then I just really want to like capture that specifically. So
No, the characters are, oddly affecting. I mean, when you watch it, it's like because you're not sure like where this one's going to go, and then yeah, they really do take on the personalities that that you all give them very quickly. I feel that they become very they're really brought to life, and it's also interesting hearing where you find these. I was actually curious if they were. Um, like dolls or puppets or whatever that had specific connection for you, like childhood toys or something. But it sounds like you actually are locating them through Goodwill and online searches in preparation for the movie. So it's
yeah,
interesting that you really find a character in them, you know, pretty quickly. It sounds like.
yeah, yeah. I love doing that. I think a part of that too is just growing up and having dogs
Mhm.
who we speaking of dogs, here's my roommate's dog, Echo,
Well, like oh,
coming to say hi. Um, but growing up with dogs, and you just like my family was one of those families who injects personalities into the dogs and has voices and characters for them. And so that just kind of transferred to me into toys. Um, and then I think there is one the GI Joe um the like evil fish at the end was actually a GI Joe that I found at a antique store that was a GI Joe that I had when I was a kid. And I had GI Joes because my dad really liked GI Joes, and it's like a funny toy that I had growing up because um, I don't know, I don't really embody that or connect with it, and I think I'm also like, was I just attracted to these dolls? But anyways, um the body of the like evil fish was that GI Joe that I popped off and then put the fish on. And then the president in the beginning was the head of that GI Joe that I popped onto a Ninja Turtle toy that I had found on the side of the road.
Wow. I was just thinking about those yesterday, the Ninja Turtle toys. That's funny. Yeah, they're uh these like the action figures from what like the late 80s or whatever.
Yeah, it
But
it must have been. It was like
Yeah.
I don't exactly know what it was because it didn't have a head.
Mhm.
It looked like some kid accidentally like dropped it out of a car window or something.
Yeah.
Um, but I just like I kind of fell in love with it because it's like really high quality and the joints are really nice and
Yeah.
so it's satisfying to like hold and play with and yeah, feels like something like Robot Chicken would do a stop motion with.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fun to see what ideas come out of that. As you were saying this, it was making me think about how some of my earliest attempts at making movies were done with, toys and figurines and GI Joe figures and things like that. Which, for me, the appeal of it was that they were like it was like you could have like a cast of thousands, proverbial cast of thousands, and it was like a little mini epic. But I remembered something the screenwriter Lloyd Fonvier had written about on his blog years ago, which I thought was interesting. He was talking about the relationship between filmmaking and those like you'd see those sets of like it would be like 100 plastic, like Civil War soldiers or whatever, and they'd have like the battle. You'd have like it was very elaborate. You'd have like opposing sides and all the different little things, and it was basically he was comparing it to like a director, directing an epic, a film, with all the extras and everything, and how he saw like those kinds of play sets. Also, yeah, there was also like the things with maybe like Lincoln Logs and stuff like that, the little log cabin sets and things. Anyway, he saw that as very cinematic, and his idea was that that had been a big influence on like a generation of directors, not because they wanted to make films specifically with relating to the themes of the toys or whatever, but just the very idea of being able to control like the environment that way and all those little all the little character all the figurines. So anyway, it's interesting to hear how that's also carried over into your work with with these dolls and toys that you're finding.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's fun and like you said, you're able to connect with them so quickly. I think
Mhm.
I really love that started with some of my other short films with this like style of puppet that I make. Where the sort of like blank expression on their face just like acts as a canvas to sort of draw people in a little bit more. And it sort of invites the audience to like uh inject themselves into and do more work and be more involved in the process of like empathizing for these characters who are ultimately kind of like they really have like a singular identity and they're not exactly like complicated but because I feel like because you can like project into them very very similarly to like when I was a kid playing with like toys and stuff where it's just like I invent a whole world for these little things without saying anything. So yeah,
That's a
I
good
think
point. That's a good point because I think the lack of an expression can lend humor, pathos sort of projected onto these characters, and I think that's probably a big part of how you get so much out of them.
yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I on that too. I've been thinking like last year I tried to watch as many movies as possible, um, and got really obsessed with like putting them on Letterboxd and whatever,
Mm.
and just keeping track. But by the end of the year, I was getting like burnt out, and I couldn't stop seeing just like faces in all the movies, and it's like there's such a thing with like the need for expression and people acting in the faces, and there's such a focus on it. And also something that was kind of like refreshing about seeing The Master is that Paul Thomas Anderson doesn't lean on that in the same way as a lot of like mainstream filmmakers do. Um, and that he has like really interesting performances from people, but he's not fixated on like a face. And I don't know exactly how to explain it, but I think there's a little bit of that in something like this where I enjoy the like and even when I in other movies where I have like real real actors, I like to direct them to deliver things really plainly. Um, one because it's easier for people like anybody to kind of hop in into that and fill those shoes, but also because it's like a little funny to me, and a little you know, antithetical to the medium in general. And so having that as like a layer of kind of subconscious invitation to the audience as well is kind of interesting to me, and playing with that, just because, faces.
Yeah. It almost reminds me of like Bresson's idea of the actor as a kind of model, as opposed to somebody who's really embodied, who's delving into a playing a character and more kind of standing in as a type, or I guess yeah, like embodying a type almost more than really delving into a richly fleshed out type of character in the way that I think casting is traditionally handled. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, on that note, my friend and I were talking about There Will Be Blood. They
no,
did a
yeah,
whole Paul Thomas Anderson series here. Uh, and he was like, obviously Daniel Day-Lewis is really good, but uh, he's like, he's so good that it's almost too perfect, where it's like distracting because it feels like he's the only person who's not acting.
hmm.
Um,
Because he just disappears into the role so much.
yeah, he disappears into it too hard, where he was like, it's a lot more engaging to watch someone like Paul Dano work his ass off to like do a really good performance in that movie. But I thought that was an interesting point because I totally understand where that's coming from and kind of a similar thing that we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, certainly with this latest film, I think you do that really well. And I was, as I said, I was surprised as I was watching it, just how I was so drawn in. And, and really that's something about all your films that you create this world and you stick to it, and I think people watching it can really be drawn in and accept it very quickly. Even though you're working with like the absurdist elements and everything and doing things in such uh, an unconventional way, but it's the viewer accepts it because it's I think you're doing it with conviction, and that brings you right into it. So yeah, no, I enjoyed the film. I'll certainly make sure to put a link to it. It is publicly released, right?
Yeah, I
It
think
is.
I have it public. Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to make sure, but yeah, I'll make sure then to put a link to it in the description of this video. Is there anything, I know we've kept you for almost an hour. Is there anything else you would like to say about it before we wrap up?
No, I think we covered a lot of it. I Yeah, I don't know. I guess sorry. I guess really I'd be interested to hear some more of your thoughts about it too, just because
Sure.
I haven't talked to very many people other than the people who were involved with it.
Well, I mean, stylistically, you were talking about like the new camera that you used and everything, and I did notice like it was you know, I guess I'd say like smaller scale in terms of the space that you were working with, as opposed to the other features I've seen where you're outdoors, you've got all the people like moving through these spaces. I like that you were working so kind of tightly framed with these puppets and characters. I also like the fact that you were bringing in a lot of the I was thinking of it as kind of like almost experimental. Very visually experimental footage you're kind of mixing together with it, and creates for me kind of an interesting collage effect where you're going sort of going back and forth, but it doesn't feel like disjointed. I mean, it feels like it's all a whole. But yeah, I like seeing those different techniques that you're bringing into it. Yeah, as I said, I found like the characters very affecting, in ways I wasn't expecting to, when I just immediately started watching it. Um, Yeah, I love the personalities that you all bring to these characters. I was curious, were there any unexpected things that came up as you were making this? Was there any like really, unexpected like detours that came up in the course of improvising?
Um, let's see. Well, I think sometimes the biggest the biggest problem is that I have a hard time not laughing. And so which I think you definitely hear behind camera. You can hear me giggling a lot, but
Yeah, but see, I found that very, I thought that was endearing with the characters. Like I could hear
yeah,
that. I thought that was, I like that just, something about the personality that brings to it. Yeah.
yeah, I love keeping that. But I think in the beginning I like couldn't hold it when my friend Ian, who played Zarthan, came out and was like, "Sup, fuckers," just because I thought that would be funny, and it was as funny as I had imagined it would be, especially with their delivery. So yeah.
I'm curious, do you have any plans to screen the film or any of your work publicly, festivals or anything like that in the near future? Is that something you've thought about?
I've submitted to a couple things. I don't think I have any like planned screenings specifically. I had a few screenings last year, which was a lot of fun. And this year I have been putting more attention to trying to get into like residencies and develop the I'm trying to go to grad school in the falls. I'm waiting to hear back from that. And so but I'm kind of I'm interested in trying to incubate a little bit and put some more thought and juice behind like playground absurdism, and kind of curious about that as like a tool for activism, because I think play is so powerful and has been like powerful for me. So I'm wondering how that can kind of be adapted in that kind of sense, but like a political sense and stuff. And but yeah, I don't have any screenings right now, and I yeah, it's kind of these playground absurdist ones are it's hard to one it's hard for people to find the time to watch them. Um and then it's also it's definitely much better to watch them with other people, and I think it's hard for someone who is like watching films for a festival to like get into what it is with these, because they are kind of abstract and conceptual, and I mean, not that it's like would be everyone's cup of tea anyways, but yeah, I don't have a lot of screenings with them because of that. I've just found that they find small homes in people like you and uh other folks who are a little more focused on the DIY.
Well, I can tell you, I've been recommending them to quite a few filmmakers recently because I just think there's so much to get out of the approach you're taking, and plus, I think the humor aspect makes them very, fun and accessible. So,
Right.
hopefully, maybe you'll hear from some of those folks if they take the time to watch them. But no, I think this latest addition to the forum has been a lot of fun to watch. And like I said, I'll put the link in the description of this video so people can go and check it out. And I know I've kept you here for quite a while, so I want to thank you for speaking with me. And
Oh
I
yeah.
could talk with you for hours, it seems like, about all these ideas with filmmaking. But I'll leave it with just saying. I encourage people to go and check it out and check out your other work. I think it's all kind of a piece. If they enjoy one of them, I think they'll find a lot to enjoy from all of your work. So, is there just any last things you want to mention? Any new, any places that people should look for your work? I've got your links from last time, which I'll include. So I didn't know if you had any other new, projects, websites out there that you wanted to point people to.
Yeah, no, I think just those. I would like to recommend everybody keep an eye out for your surveillance film.
Well,
Uh,
thank you.
I
Thank you.
think
I
it'd
appreciate
be
you checking it out.
effectively edited with desirable camcorder footage. Um, but yeah, I don't have any pieces to plug. I have no plugs at the moment.
All right. Well, I hope everything goes well with your, any upcoming projects and things work out with grad school and everything. Wishing you the best of luck with that. And I just wanted to thank you again for speaking with me and for your time today because it's always a pleasure. And I always feel like I get inspired listening to you talk about filmmaking.
Oh, thanks so much. I love doing it. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.